And I just want to say today is July the 28th, 2021. We continue our specialty crop virtual lunch series today on garden mums in Tennessee. This is our fourth and final meeting in this series, and appreciate those who've been with us some every day and some who may just be joining us for the first time. We're grateful to have you here with us also. We've looked at pollination of specialty crops last week. We looked at marketing of specialty crops last week. Yesterday, we did cut flowers in Tennessee, and today we're going to have garden mums in Tennessee. Again, this project that we worked on here at the center is a project in developing certain different crop profiles for use. Is been used through the Specialty Crop Block Grant with the Tennessee Department of Agriculture, and we appreciate their help and their support as we have worked with the Center for Crop Diversification as well, the University of Kentucky, to get some of these crop profiles done. We'll look again maybe at some of those at the end today, and again be sending the rest of the profiles to everyone at the conclusion today or tomorrow to get all the profiles out to everyone. Today we got Lucas Holman with us. Lucas is the Extension Director in Wilson County. Glad to have Lucas with us today to talk about garden mums. I heard him I guess it's been a couple of years ago. First time I heard him present on garlic. And man, I was blown away by what he presented and how he presented his information. You can follow him on Twitter and give him a shout out there. He had lots of good daylilies and lots of things on his Twitter page, and a little girl on there as well. Yep. That looks always great. So follow him on Twitter if you haven't already. But just appreciate his time today as well. As we go along, if there's any questions, we had a few in the chat box yesterday as we went, or you can save those for the end, and we'll take time to do those at the end. So, Lucas, I'm going to give it to you, and I think you should be able to share your screen, and we'll just go from there, sir. Thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. Are y'all seeing, which screen are y'all seeing, Troy? Are you seeing the full presentation mode, or do I need to move it over?
I got the full thing right now.
Okay, I just want to make sure because my screens look a little different on here.
Gotcha. No, it looks good.
Okay. Well, I am excited about talking about this today. I grew up in the greenhouse industry in a small town called Rockwood, Tennessee. And we used to grow 5,000 or 6,000 mums every year. And I remember sticking mum cuttings when I was 8 or 9 years old, all the way up until I actually left and went to college and things. And they still did retail mums for until just a few years ago. So I've always been in the green industry. My mom still works at the greenhouse that my aunt and uncle owns, and she's approaching 70 this year. So my mother's still involved in this industry, and she loves it so much. As we go through this, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. And if we don't know the answers, we're going to find the answers for you. And I want to make sure I catch your questions, but I don't think we're going to stop in the middle and answer those. I think we're going to catch those up at the very end. Now, in the fall time, whenever you think about just the fall plants in general, you think of corn stalks, you think of pumpkins, and you think of mums. Now, we actually raise mums on our small farm also, and a lot of smaller farmers are seeing this as a great niche market. So we have a lot of people who are diverse in their operations. They'll have tomatoes, and then they'll have vegetable operations, and they may be selling meat, but they're trying to find something else as the vegetables start to wane in the fall time, and they're starting to do some of these other fall crops, such as mums, pansies, asters, and some other perennials. And they've been extremely successful. If you've kept up with any of the gardening trends from COVID, you know that gardening has shot through the roof. Last year, it was impossible to find seeds. We had a hard time getting soil. We had a hard time getting pots. So what did that do to consumers? It drove all these home gardeners to try to buy all this stuff up. So what do? They wanted more plants. They wanted more soil. They wanted more pots. They were buying all this stuff up, which was great for the green industry, which has kind of faltered over the past few years. So we saw this term called pandemic gardening. And I think a lot of small farmers capitalized on selling plants last year, and more of them are starting to do that in the future. Now, mum values in Tennessee are between $4.5 million and $5 million every year. Now, that was the latest numbers from about 2014. That has got to be higher than that right now. When we look at wholesale versus retail, about 10 to 20% of the entire Tennessee market is retail, and most of it is actually is wholesale. So 80% of the mums that we're selling is actually wholesale. And it kind of depends on what you're actually going to market it for. If you're going to try to directly market to someone, you're obviously going to make more money. And I know there was a presentation. We see a lot of presentations on marketing and things like that. But I think we need to go ahead and think about how we're going to get rid of our product at the end of the year. I get so nervous when I see a pumpkin farmer. I've raised 15 acres of pumpkins. Well, how are you going to get rid of them? Well, I'm not really sure yet. That's kind of nervous for me. Makes me nervous for them. So go ahead and have some game plans on how you're going to actually start marketing your products. We see a lot of fundraisers being sold for mums in the fall time now. Baseball teams, cheerleading teams, a lot of these high school FFA groups, the 4-H groups, we're selling mums, and they need places to buy these from. So you'll see a lot of people. If you start advertising that you're going to have mums, they're going to start wanting to use them as a fundraiser. And I think it's a fantastic niche market. I don't think you'll have a hard time, but you have to get your name out there. You have to let people know that you're out there selling them. There are around 100 producers of mums in Tennessee, and this number is going to go up every year. And I think it's just going to trend upward over the next few years because of pandemic gardening. So I think when we're thinking about direct marketing, you're going to make more money this way, but there's going to be more work involved, especially if you're having to drive to farmers markets, if you're going to have a roadside stand, or if you're going to do with your CSAs. So in the fall time, we still have a lot of producers who are doing CSAs with a lot of their cool season fall crops, but they're also adding mums, they're adding the pumpkins, they're adding the corn stalks and things like that. What I think it's cool is I've seen high schools do these fundraisers where they'll carve out a pumpkin, they'll put a mum in it, and they'll call it a mumkin. And they're using this as just something unique to try to add value to their product. And I think anything you can do to up that price on something that you're selling from your farm is great. When we look at some of these other things that people are selling, like the farmers markets, it's a haul. You need to have an enclosed trailer to try to move some of these mums to a farmer's market from your farm. You can't just leave them on the backside of a trailer unless you want to actually make sure they're covered up. Roadside stands, we have some people that have success with a roadside stand, and some of them are on the honor system, but then we hear the horror stories of where they take the honor system box and things like that. There are people that steal out there. So you kind of have to make sure you're looking at your market. How are you going to sell them? A lot of people just sell directly from the farm, and I think that's easier. You're going to make more money. You're going to have a lot less transport, and you're not having to worry about hauling them somewhere, especially in August and September when it's 95 degrees. Mums are not really going to be happy with that. In Tennessee, we're going to go through just the basics of growing chrysanthemums for fall time. And we're going to look at irrigation, fertigation, soil, pots, and I'm going to try to show some different systems that I've been a part of over the years. Now, for about 10 years, I taught high school agriculture and FFA at Riverdale High School and a short time at Blackman High School in Murfreesboro. So at Riverdale, for those 9 or 10 years, we raised mums every year. So the kids would always plant them the week after Memorial Day, and then we would have the system built, and then we would actually sell them in the fall as a fundraiser. In Tennessee, they are grown outside in containers. Why? They can get stressed out from the heat of a greenhouse. They are a cool season crop in the fall time. That's when they're going to start blooming. But we normally don't see mums grown in greenhouses. They're normally outside on some type of black plastic or gravel. And I'll talk about the irrigations later. Generally, they're outside, and they are grown from cuttings in full sun. So let me stress that. If you have them next to a building or next to a row of trees somewhere and they get shade half the day, they're not going to bloom correctly. Mums are short day plants, meaning they actually start triggering their bloom cycle when the days get shorter. And if they're not having natural daylight, then it's going to throw them off, and they could perhaps bloom a month early, or they could perhaps bloom a month late. And we kind of have a small window when we actually want to try to market our mums in the fall time. We don't want them to start blooming at Thanksgiving. We don't want our mums to start blooming in August. And I've had all these things happen. It can be a headache when you have some mums blooming in August, nobody is going to want mums. We've seen that happen with a pumpkin farmer here. He had some beautiful pumpkins that he planted the first or second week of April. He had all these pumpkins ready the first or second week of August, and nobody wanted them then. So make sure you're actually growing them in full sun in Tennessee. Now, when you order mums, they're going to be broken up by the season that they'll actually color up. So when you get a catalog from whichever place that you're going to be buying cuttings from, it'll say early season mums, mid-season mums, late season mums, and they'll usually give a date and they'll say these early season mums will bloom September 1 through September the 15th. And the mid-season will be September 15th through September the 30th, and late season will be October 1 through October 30th. That's a good standard to look at when you want your mums to bloom. In Tennessee, we generally like to have mums blooming from the first week of September all the way through Halloween. So if you can get a diverse mixture of all of them blooming, so you're not putting all of your eggs into one basket, you're going to have a good long season. So you're not saying, all right, all our mums are blooming this weekend only. And that way you're not trying to push all your mums in one weekend. So we always, my wife and I, whenever we're ordering, and then some other high schools when we're helping them, we always try to have them mix it up. Get a diverse mixture. I already said all that. I think I hit on all those bullet points. When to get started. In Tennessee, we generally plant mums the last week of May through the first week of July. And I think I put the end of June on here. But most of the pictures that you'll see on this is our operation. And you'll see some operations from when I taught high school, and you'll see a picture I stole from the internet. So normally I like to use my own pictures in presentations. I'm not a fan of borrowing pictures from the internet. Order the cuttings the winter before you decide to grow. Why? Most mum places that are actually selling the cuttings, they only stick the cuttings that are already sold by about the first or second week of January. And that's because they're patented. They have a license and they're only allowed to grow. Well, they all have unique names. So like a Padre Orange is a type of mum. So this one grower can only sell 10,000 Padre Orange. And then once he kind of hits 10,000 Padre Orange, he'll kind of cap it off. But if you try to call them in February or March, all those 10,000 are probably going to be sold already. So in the wintertime, go ahead and get all of your supplies ordered also. COVID has kind of hurt the supply chain on some of this soil, some of this pot, some of this irrigation. I had the worst time this year trying to find pots, and luckily I found a place in Kentucky that had some available. It was difficult to find irrigation supplies online, and I think hopefully I've got everything lined up this year. I was kind of crunching at the last minute to get all this stuff. So in the winter, the previous winter, order your mum cuttings. They're going to range anywhere from 35 cents a piece up to 65 cents a piece. If it's patented, it'll normally have a color tag with it. But I'm going to be honest, most people, when they see a mum blooming, they're not going to look at the tag in it. They're going to just want the plant. Go ahead and start getting your irrigation supplies set up a couple of months in advance. And I'll talk more about the injector system and everything. So hopefully you'll order them 6 months before you're ever going to plant them. So our system that we've kind of been using the last couple of years is this system here. Normally people will put down a layer of crusher run or gravel, and then they'll put this landscape fabric on top. This is a brand called DeWitt. It lasts quite a few years. Now, there are cheaper brands that you can use. A lot of the cheaper brands will not even last 2 years. So after 1 or 2 years, they kind of start fading away and all the edges tear, and they'll start having holes in the middle of them. So if you're going to make sure that you don't want weeds all around your mums, make sure you spend the money and get a good landscape fabric. But you can't use plastic. You need to use something porous. Mums have a tendency to rot if we have enough rain. They can develop a lot of the root rots really quickly and easily. So don't use straight plastic over that gravel, because inevitably it's not going to be level all over, and you're going to have some pockets that's going to hold water. get inspected. Now, TDA, Tennessee Department of Agriculture, requires a permit for selling of all plants in Tennessee. It's quick and it's a very simple process. They're just going to come out and look for bugs and diseases. And that way you're not going to get in trouble later down the road trying to sell plants in the fall. And they'll come in and say, well, you can't sell plants. You don't have a permit. And it's all based upon your growing area. So, and there's different fees for 600 feet to 1,500 square feet to so many acres and things. Quick and easy. All the plant inspectors that we work with, they're easy. And this was my daughter, and I made a Facebook post about this a year or two ago when we were raising mums right after. This was last year when she was born, right before COVID shut the entire world down. I told people, I said, I was so excited when this little plant inspector dropped by. My daughter was excited to walk through the mums. She was real little then. So this year, she helped plant the mums. So you're going to probably see some other pictures of my daughter as we go through this. The old-fashioned mums that we used to raise in the 70s and the 80s required pinching heavily to keep that rounded look. No more. We do not pinch mums anymore. It used to be an awful headache to go through and try to shape those mums all the time. All new mums do not require pinching. All these breeders have done a fantastic job at actually breeding for that well-rounded mum that's going to have blooms from the top all the way down the sides. So you get asked questions sometimes, well, should I pinch them? Should I pinch them? No, no, no. And that was an old way to do mums. We do not do that anymore. And that's kind of how our mums come in the trays like that. Those trays are actually 51. You can actually get some mums from different companies. They'll come in a bag of just rooted cuttings, and some will come in trays of 102. So each place does their mum cuttings a little bit differently. Spacing, look at your area. Most mums are grown in 8 or 9 inch mum pans, which is a shallow pot, which is just a general. You can go to most greenhouse supply companies and say, I need a mum pan, and they already know what you want. They need to be spaced anywhere from 16 to 20 inches apart. You do not want these growing together. Why? You're going to get weird, boxy looking mums that nobody's going to want. If they start growing together, you need to go figure out a way to space them out, pull some out of the middle, and actually make sure that they're not touching. The other reason we do that, they can develop some rots and some fungus. I'm going to show you some pictures of some fungus we had last year. And it was just lack of airflow in some areas where we had some too tight. You want the wind, the air, to completely wrap all the way around the mum 24 hours a day until you actually sell it. Because if water sits on that leaf and it doesn't dry out, you could develop some of these diseases. Also determine the size of your container. And you can grow it mums in anything from a 4-inch pot to an 8 to 9-inch pot, up to a 16, 18. We've seen them in 20-inch pots. You're going to have to space those accordingly to the size that you want them to be. Many horticultural suppliers can help you with spacing. And there are a lot of great guides online. So mum companies, Syngenta, Zuman, Getaflora, Yoder, there are a lot of big mum suppliers, and they can help you with spacing because some mums are going to be more compact than others. Containers, generally, like I said earlier, they're 8 to 9-inch mum pans. If you're one of those who are looking for some of the unique markets, you see these tricolor mums coming out. They are in larger containers. Normally, it's a 14 to a 16-inch pot. And just see what your market wants. People really eat up these tricolor mums. So most of them are growing in a 14-inch pot, which is pretty large. Requires a lot more soil, which requires a lot more money. But they're charging $25 to $30 for that one mum when you only have $7 or $8 in the entire mum. So those containers right there, the light ones, the light tan ones are 15.5 inch. And I paid about $5 a pot for them. That's wholesale price for those pots. It took $3 or $4 in soil. And then the mum cuttings, I think we bought this year, were 55 cents a piece. And I can go through, and I roughly know what I have in each container. And I think sometimes small farmers need to put pencil to paper and actually determine whether this venture, whatever it is actually making money or not. I think I hit on my containers. Buy a good potting soil that is well drained and aerated, which means it's going to have perlite in it. I see sometimes people trying to make their own mixes with compost and things like that. Compost, if you had bark chipped in, the problem with that, it can harbor some diseases. Bagged soil mixes generally have been tested for weeds. They've generally been treated or heated for all these diseases. So if you're going to make your own mix, use some, you may have some issues later on down the road. Now, we use a commercial bagged mix, and there are plenty of types of soil that you can grow. Sun-Grow, Fafford, Pro Mix, and you can buy all types of different soil from some of these commercial places. But get a good well-drained potting soil, because I think mums like to dry out a little bit in between waterings. Mums stress out extremely easy. So if you're going through and you miss fertilization, and we actually use a fertilizer injector in our watering system, and I meant to take pictures of it this morning, and I completely forgot to when I left the house. So we use a cheap fertilizer injector that we mix a fertilizer through, and it runs about 1 to 100. And the fertilizer injector was about $225. And I can use that for the next few years until it actually tears up. I have sulfur water at my house. So my farm where my barn is, it's a pretty stout sulfur water. And I think sulfur may eat my, my fertilizer injector up over the next few years. You've got to make sure you keep your fertility at 100% all the way. If you miss it for a few days, they're going to stress out. And when mom's stressed out, they can initialize bud drop, or they can start flowering way too early. We don't want to stress these guys out. So normally our fertilizer injector is even running sometimes when it's raining, because I need these mums to have constant nitrogen throughout the growing season. Normally a slow release is added to the pots. So normally they'll add some kind of granular fertilizer to the pots and then go through and pump it with 250 parts per million nitrogen from the time you plant it all the way through. Now, I had some problems with some water pressure, and I've lost a few this year because of some water pressure issues that I had to determine how much my well could actually pump out. If you are not using a granular fertilizer and you are just using straight liquid fertilizer through the injector system, you're going to run about 300 to 350 parts per million of nitrogen. Normally, most people are going to use 20/20 or 20/10/20. But there are a lot of guides online. It's always good to test out your water, see what you're dealing with. It's always good if you're making your own soil too, to test out what the pH of your soil and things actually is. Because if the pH is really off, it's going to lock up some nutrients on some of the soil mixes. But that's just a basic guide for fertility on mums. Now, irrigation, I stole this picture off the internet. You're going to see people do it all kinds of different ways. They're going to be using trickle or drip tape, which is in this picture, which is what I grew up using. You're going to see people using overhead, and you're going to see people using spaghetti tubing, which is what I use now. So the trickle or drip tape, they will normally put railroad ties at the very end, and they'll have some type of a bracket on top of that railroad tie, and they'll shut it off on one end. And then on the other end, that's where they've actually plugged their irrigation. Most of that trickle tape or drip tape's already spaced out 14 or 16 inches, depending on what type you buy. And then they'll run it just along the top of the pots. Overhead irrigation for mum production is discouraged. It brings on disease. We don't want a lot of water sitting on top of these leaves and sitting there all night. And then that's where we get a lot of our fungus issues. And I had a disease called web blight, and I'll show you some pictures. I had to send it to someone else because I'd never seen this before, and it was just water sitting on the leaf. And I was using some spaghetti tubing, but last year we had an awful amount of rain. And the trickle tape, you're going to have a few hiccups with it. The pros and cons, it's easy to set up, it's cheap, One of the cons is wind, so you may have to go through and actually stake it ever so often. And if you have a dog or a deer or a human walk through there and knock it off, one, it's just going to knock off the whole row, or it could flip some of them too, depending on how tight you get it. Now, the spaghetti tubing is what I started. You can start seeing it put right here. You can get the black, and you can use PVC. It's a little bit more challenging, but it's going to break up in the sun. Now, this is just a black irrigation tubing, I guess it's like polyethylene tubing, and I can puncture a hole in it pretty easily. And I've got this drip tape, or this spaghetti tubing, actually plugged into it, and it's worked out extremely well. The cons to this spaghetti tubing, in periods of drought, rats, mice, rabbits will chew little bitty holes in it to get water. So there's pros and cons to both. And this has worked out really well. And I do like this. I can't remember the name of this brand of tubes that I got, or spaghetti tubes, but they have a little weight on the end, so it just lays into the pot. Normally they don't fall out. I have a bunch of dogs in my house, so they're really good about running through, knocking off some of them also. But that's what that white tubing is. And I took a couple of nights to work on the other ones and get all those in. Now, when we look at some of the pests and diseases that mums are going to get, you're going to have hiccups. And I think some people think at the beginning of the year, I'm going to plant 1,000 mums. I'm going to sell that 1,000 mums for $10 each. I'm going to make this much money. Well, you need to take out your costs, and that's a big chunk of it. You also need to account you're just going to lose some to rot. Now, we lost some to rot last year because there was one week we got 6 or 7 inches of rain, and I could not save some of them just from root rot. You're going to get some fusarium wilt. You're going to get some bacterial leaf spot. You're going to have diseases. Now, last year, I had a problem with armyworms, and I had some, and I sprayed for armyworms. When I first saw them, I was like, I'm going to hit this little section here. I see armyworms coming in. Now, armyworms are in Middle Tennessee now. The fall armyworms are already here. So I've seen damage already done. I haven't seen the worms in the mums, but I've seen some feces hanging out on some leaves. And I was like, oh, this is way too early for these fall armyworms to actually start hitting. So you're going to have other caterpillars also. You're going to have aphids. You're going to have spider mites. So you need to kind of have some plans in place to treat for some of these things. Normally, most growers are going to start with a preventative good fungicide and start going from there and spraying, depending on what you're using, in some type of a cyclical manner to prevent that. So like once a mum develops fusarium wilt or one of the root rots, there's no saving it. Now, I lose some every year to some of the root rots, and it's just, I can't control the rain. So last year and I had to send this to Dr. Hale in Nashville. I said, I've got this little worm or little caterpillar eating up some of my mums. And he was able to help me with it. We were able to spray for it and knock it out. All right. So I had this disease pop up into the mums. This is called web blight. You can see it at the top of the picture. There's a little white mold starting to pop up. This was just caused by, I had some weeds around the sides, and the weeds were laying on, I assume, some of the leaves and actually keeping the leaves wet. I had to send this to Dr. Wyndham to figure it out. Now, I've grown mums for years, and I just remember being in the mum patch when I was 10 years old. I have never seen this until last year. All right. I took this picture this morning, right in the middle of a very healthy row of mums. You look, and one has wilted down. This is one of those crazy root rot diseases that you're going to get. And I'm probably just going to pitch it out. Now, if you're one to reuse containers, it's probably best to make sure you bleach out some of these. No, I do reuse containers. Clean them out real well. Make sure you're using some good management practices. Clean up the weeds around the mum pad. Make sure that the weeds are not actually laying any foliage, any seeds are actually popping out onto the mums and actually popping up in it. I had some crabgrass and some that pop up, and just walk out there and scout. Make sure that you're just constantly looking for any hiccups that may be. Because if you have armyworms come in one section and you're not out there every day, at least looking once a day, armyworms are fast and they will go through and wipe out quite a few mums extremely fast. Management practices: avoid soil contact. So a lot of the soil-borne pathogens, a lot of the wilts can be in the soil, just bare dirt. So if you don't have some type of fabric or gravel or something between that, you're going to have that come up because their roots are going to come out of those mum containers sometimes and hit that soil. And if that fusarium's in the soil, it's going to go up to the container. Sanitation practices: keep the area around your mum pad clean. Try to avoid overhead irrigation and scout. I think it's not one of those set it and forget it ventures. And then I know some people have that mindset with farming, with some of these specialty crops. Well, I'll set it, and, in 6 months I'll harvest it and I'll be good. I'll make all this money. It's just not that easy. I wish people would scout and walk out there more often just to look to see what's happening. So people may call the office and they'll say, well, all my tomatoes are dead. Well, what happened? Well, I'm just not sure. They just all died. And if you can catch some of these diseases ahead of time, you can prevent some of them. You can use some sprays. Now, when it comes to fungicides on mums, a lot of suppliers will be able to help you with preventatives, because once a mum actually develops some of these rots and web blights and some of the things, normally there's no saving them. So you just got to pitch them. It's mostly used as a preventative. Clean containers that you've been reusing over the past. So if you had a bunch of those $5 15-inch containers that you didn't sell, wash them with bleach, some type of a 10% bleach solution, to make sure you kill anything out. When you're selling these mums, most people buying these mums want it when the buds are just starting to show color. So we do a lot of advertising through social media, and we try our hardest to let people know, well, we've got another 10 days until the first color starts showing, or here's the size they are this week. And we try to build up suspense until the fall, and we'll say, all right, September 18th, we're going to be open from 9 to 12. That way they come to us. I'd rather not have to drive to a farmer's market because I'm lazy, mostly on the weekends. 90% of the people want them when they're not fully open. So if you wait to start selling a lot of these mums when they are fully open and fully bloomed, you're going to have a hard time selling them. So make sure, I think that's when we actually opened our first weekend. I said they're starting to show color, and that way, that's when most people want them. Now, when we were growing mums for high school, boy, these kids knocked it out of the park. I think these were 16-inch containers. We put 3 plugs in a container, and this lady and this guy, they own a wedding venue in Woodbury, Tennessee. They were excited. So when my high school kids were loading up, they're like, they've got a tiny Jeep. So we were trying to figure out, and her name's Gail. Gail was so excited to haul this huge mum. So my high school kids, they were the ones who grew these really large ones. So you can grow these mums as big as you want. The problem, if you stress them out, you're gonna have some problems. So if you push them with too much nitrogen, they'll split. And I'm sure if you've ever grown mums before, you've had some of these mums get really so big, and we think, yeah, this is gonna be awesome. You go out there after a good rainstorm and they've split wide open. Nobody wants that at that point. I'd rather have them short and squatty as opposed to tall and able to split. On the stress side, I can't stress it enough. They need natural daylight. They don't need to be on the side of a tree line where they're only getting light from 12 o'clock on until supper. If they get stressed from water, if they get stressed from fertility, when they go a week without fertigation, then they're going to start initializing buds. So if you have buds start popping up in August, the first week of August, you may be done for, and you may have some really nice mums in the middle of August that nobody's going to actually want. Now, there are things you can't control, such as some of these environmental stresses. And now the environmental stresses is going to be heat, humidity, which we're in Tennessee. if you've been outside today, you might as well, it's like, taking a shower and not drying off and then putting your shirt back on. That's exactly what it's like being outside right now. And it's pretty miserable. I had some visits yesterday with some people, and I was just pouring sweat, and I wasn't even doing anything physical, just standing outside. That can stress these things out if they're dry. So you don't want to do that. We also have a few hiccups where we'll get calcium or magnesium deficiencies. So if you're able to test your water, test your soil to make sure your pH is right. Now, on a lot of cases, I took this picture just the other day. I have some that are turning yellow. A lot of times it's going to be an iron deficiency, magnesium, or calcium. So I'm going to use an Epsom salt drench on these. Epsom salts, which is magnesium, is going to darken these things up and they'll be fine. But then looking at some of these other rows, and I've got one row and it's looking good, but I've got two in the middle of it. That's just small. I think I've just got there's a couple of varieties that's just not been successful for Tennessee. And I'm not going to say yes or no. I need to try them again to see. Now, when you look at, if you get a mum catalog from Ball or Syngenta, it's going to have 200 types and colors and varieties and series in it. So do your research, and I would go to other growers around and say, what mums are you growing? Where are you getting them from? Because I think some of these mums may not be suited for Tennessee's heat and humidity. And I think some of my stock is showing that this year. But kind of wrapping this up, I wanted to hit on just the basics of growing mums. Please utilize your extension agents, utilize your specialists. If you've never been to the Pick Tennessee Products Conference, they don't normally have a pathway for mums, but they have a pathway for the Tennessee Flower Growers Association, which is all the greenhouse growers in Tennessee. And they're a great group of folks who want to help out anybody trying to make things diverse on their farm. Also, reach out to the Center for Profitable Ag. Now, Troy hit on some of the new publications that's coming out. Maybe you'll hit on it. So we've got one coming out, and I assume it's already released, called Garden Mum Production in Tennessee. We have a lot of wealth of knowledge in Tennessee. So before you jump fully head first, I want to encourage you to start small. If this is the first time you've done it, and you can start off only doing 300, 400, 500, and you'll be fine, and you'll be comfortable, and you'll be profitable if you do it correct. But try it first and see how it goes. I get nervous when somebody jumps in and says, well, I'm going to try 5,000 this year. Woo! That's a lot of work, a lot of money invested just to try on a gamble a little bit. And I like to see farms that are diverse, and mums is just one of those things that's just going to fill in that niche with people who are selling these corn stalks and pansies and pumpkins in the fall time. They need to have mums in that mixture also. All right, Troy, I think I'm done.
Lucas, thank you, sir. We appreciate that. Any questions for Lucas from anyone? If not at the moment, Lucas, would you back up just a half a second? You mentioned just a minimum number. If someone has some interest, what was the number you just threw out there for somebody that might just have an interest in trying to begin in this?
300 to 500, I think, would be fine. And I think it's mostly depending on what the supplier. So some of them will have requirements. Like I know one grower, I think the requirements is you have to buy at least 50 to try. So depending on your supplier, depending on how they've got it in their trays and things like that, you may have to buy a minimum number.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Lucas, if you'll hang over just a minute, if you don't mind, the next thing may prop up a question or two just in case, but fine. I'm going to try to quickly. I just want to try to share a couple of things. I know some of the agents on here have seen this probably already, but I want to just share with you just a second. I'm hoping you might see the Center for Profitable Agriculture website. Yep. Okay. If folks want to go to this, sometimes this is our website for the center. It's just cpa.tennessee.edu. You'll get our basic landing site here. What I want to get to is if you'll just go over to one of the program area button and click that. We have several things that just pop up, some of the different areas that we are covering at the moment in the center. as we look at some value added agriculture, you'll see our staff members and some of the things that we're trying to cover. A lot of value added things as far as meat and poultry and dairy are on there also. But the specialty crop profiles that I want to go to for just a second or two, if you don't mind. Again, we've been working with the uh, Center for Crop Diversification out of Kentucky, and we don't have near the profiles that they have. We're just trying to get a half a dozen or so to get started, but they have several hundred. But the ones that we're doing on this project, we're to have up to six. We've got the high tunnel production one in the process, and then we've got cider apples, and we've got, I think, mushrooms that are to come yet. But the three that are finished, I just want to go to the garden mom that Lucas showed you there for just a moment ago. This is pretty much what it is, and this is the layout of any of these crop profiles. They might be 5 to 6 pages long. The one on cut flowers that you may have seen yesterday, it's 12 pages. They added several different tables in there that they wanted to add on varieties and that kind of thing. But each of the profiles just kind of outline something about whatever the crop might be. Again, this is the garden mom production in Tennessee. Hits a little bit on marketing there early, as Lucas did in his presentations. A couple of pictures that you'll find in here about the production systems and irrigation, again, as Lucas kind of outlined to you in his presentation. Again, don't want to make you dizzy as we go down through this, but a little bit on pest management. And again, all these are laid out in the same way. Harvest, handling of the whatever crop it might be. We'll have a little bit in each of the profiles about that, and then each of them kind of end up with some economic considerations and things that you can look at. This has a comparison budget, if you will, toward the end of this particular profile. And then it ends up with just some other resources. And Lucas mentioned some things just at the end of his presentation. These give you some other things to look at as far as mums. And Dr. Wren, that was with us last week in marketing, she was one of the reviewers for this particular publication as well. So I just wanted to show that one to you. We do have the culinary herb production in Tennessee. We have the cut flower one on here as well. One of the other things that we haven't addressed much in this series, and just take a moment or two, some other specialty crop profiles. We just kind of had a group of agents kind of get together and ask them some questions about specialty crops a good while back, and give us a list of the top 20 that you thought growers might be interested in. So this will be used for agents or anyone. But these are the 20 profiles that we came up with from that group. And these are just direct links to the Center for Crop Diversification out of Kentucky and using theirs. So in the meantime, we just wanted to have something on here, maybe as a quick reference for us and for Tennessee growers also. But this is our list that we have here. And the other one is just a link to the Center for Crop Diversification with Kentucky. I know we're talking about them a lot. We use some of their things. They use a lot of things out of the Center out of our Center for Profitable Agriculture from time to time in different areas that they're looking in. So we kind of swap some resources back and forth. But this link would take you directly to their homepage. There are lots of things on here. This is kind of where the idea for the crop profiles came from. But if you look at the go to production, it'll bring you up another slide here, another screen. Crop specific is what we'll go to today. And then they have hundreds of crop profiles and divided up in different ways: fruit, vegetable, high tunnels, and so forth, as you can see. Quickly at just vegetables, if we hit vegetables, there's a whole lineup of vegetables that they have. And just for instance, you want to come down here, if you want to go to crop profile on watermelon, you can do that. It gives you a little introduction to the crop itself, but if you'll continue down to the bottom of the page, you'll come to the crop profile for whatever crop that you are looking at. This is the crop profile for watermelons. And again, it's going to be set up pretty similar to the one that we just saw. So all of them are very similar. This is the ones just out of the Center for Crop Diversification, and these are usually, again, about a 4 or 5 page publication to look at. Good to work. Agents work with small growers, and any other producers that are on the call can get to this straight to this website as well. Since we do have just a couple of minutes, they do have budgets here. You can find budgets in lots of other places as well. But if you just go to the budget section, They do have something if you're looking for small scale on budgets on a small scale. Even though this is 2017, but it gives small scale budgets for these items. You can click on that as well, and you'll get the spreadsheet to pop up here on the bottom. And if you can just open that up, hopefully it'll do that for me here quickly, so it won't take too much time. This will give you a set of things that you can look at on small scale. For some of the crops, you'll get the list of the crops down at the bottom. Continue on with the buttons and you'll get several other things there. This one for sweet corn, this is done on 1/10 of an acre. So 15 100-foot rows on 36-inch rows. Again, gives you some ideas that you can start your own, the producers can start their own new column out here on the right hand side to put in their figures. But these are something just to kind of give you something to look at and go by. I know as agents get a lot of calls on some small scale things from time to time, and this might be something that you could look at to kind of be helpful there. Again, there's lots of several different ones down here at the bottom. Won't have everything, but it give you several different crops that you can look at through the bottom of that page as well. Same thing on the large scale. Won't go through that right now, but I think with using some of the things that the Center for Crop Diversification has, as well as hopefully some things on our website, then these things can be pretty helpful to everyone. Again, as we just kind of close out today, I don't believe, let me also stop sharing. Excuse me just a second here. Stop sharing. If not any more questions, I just want to let the group know that I'll be sending out, everything has been recorded, and we'll get those on the website here somewhere. And as soon as I do that, we'll get the email out to everyone. Again, we've had over 70 register for these. We haven't had everybody show up for all of them, but there's a lot of interest in watching the recording, so we'll get that done. I believe Lucas is going to try to send me a copy of his PowerPoint today, and I'll get that sent out, and eventually as well get everyone that's on the call and they signed up a copy of each of the profiles that we've done. We did send out the cut flower one yesterday. But Lucas, any parting words or anything else from you?
I think I put everybody asleep.
No, you're good. You're good. I think Lucas wants everyone to come to the Wilson County and Tennessee State Fair beginning next month.
August 12th to the 21st.
He's right in the middle of all of that. So, Lucas, thank you for your time today.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate everyone joining us as well. And with that, thank you for the comment in the text. Thanks for everyone joining us, and we'll get some other information to you via email pretty soon. May try to put together just a little bit of a short, it'll be brief evaluation on some of the things as well. So thank everyone for being here, and stay cool the rest of the day and the rest of the week. Thank you all.
Bye.